go once a week during the weekend for the beautiful people. We'll be on Saturdays for the NFL during the NFL season. And we are here to kind of talk about something that we've been, what's the proper word here, kind of hinting at over the last couple of weeks. And it was a few weeks ago when we were talking about guys that could shine out during next season based off of a article from Adam Shine. The ticker was Shine Bright Like a Diamond, spelled as his last name.
It's bad. Bad article.
I thought it was witty world. I mean, yes, the article was bad.
Bad article.
The witty wordplay overall was great, but
no, that A+. The article F.
Exactly. F-. But anyways, not taking any more shots at people aside. That was Justin a couple weeks ago in the final ranked podium of the history of our pod on a different YouTube channel. And of course, it motivated us to finally get our butts in gear and to make our own list. So later on in this episode, as you could tell by the title that you're watching here on YouTube, we here on the show are going to talk about our personal 2023 NFL breakout candidates, guys who we think have a really good shot at taking the next step in their career this upcoming season. But before we get all into that, we have our little fun. But before we get to that, it's been 2 minutes and I haven't even introduced the boys. That might be a new record on the show. Maybe, I don't know. I always ramble. This troublesome trio that you are seeing here, this condominium of chaos. I don't know. I was thinking of a C word there and I just came up with condominium. I don't know why. Joining me on the bottom of the screen, he's the games master of the show. Trivia, would you rather, fact or fiction. He knows all, he sees all, and he Google searches all because F Bing. It is our game master, Justin. Justin, how we doing?
I guess good. I'm not on Bing today, so.
Yeah, well, remember, Sandoval was the one using Bing, and that's how he apparently bested you, according to some people.
Forgot about that damn deer.
A deer that will no longer be showing up on the show because, the person to my right on the screen ended him. The Podfather himself, the rant master extraordinaire of the show, Podfather Rick. Rick, how we doing?
In the words of Joseph Stalin and communism in general.
What?
The deer never existed. There was no deer. You never saw one. You only thought you saw a deer, but there was never a deer ever. You're not even sure there was a deer. What is a deer? I don't know. There's no deer ever. So, Guten Tag, Jerk.
Yeah, thanks.
That's for you, yes. We're doing good. We are excited to move forward with this month and get on to July and then get closer and closer to, I guess, the Hall of Fame game. So, we'll see what happens from there.
Well, I think a little bit more past the Hall of Fame game is what we're going to get closer to. But as Rick mentions there, guys, it is the summertime. It's a little bit of a slow time, but that's why we have episodes like this that are here to entertain the people and still talk football. And very soon, I think in the next couple of weeks or so, we are going to bring back our NFL divisional previews like we did last year going into 2022. Now we're going to be doing them going into 2023. And it's going to be fun times to say the least because there's a division or two where we have absolutely no idea in the world of what's going to happen. There's a division that I would probably say at least one where we're all going to be consensus on who's going to win that division. And then the rest, who knows? And then at the end of all of our division previews, towards the end of the summer going into the fall, we are going to give you our personal predictions for our playoff teams. And then, of course, that means the season begins and the fun only continues. But obviously, before we get all into that type of fun, we have a different kind of fun to go into because fun football chaos is the tagline of the program. And let's get to the fun with our games master, Justin. Justin, what do we got today?
All right. So for trivia, every team currently has in their history at least one 11-game season. Who is currently having the longest drought since their last 11-plus win season?
The Texans have had an 11-win season?
According to this, in 2018, they were 11-5.
Wow. Was Bill O'Brien their head coach?
I believe so.
I think that was the year of the 24-0 blown playoff game lead.
Oh, maybe. You're right.
Because I think, if memory serves, I want to say they beat a young Josh Allen and Buffalo Bills team. Because that was the same playoff game where Josh Allen threw it to a fullback in double coverage, and somehow years later, that man is somehow dating Haley Steinfeld. Goddamn the universe. Anyways, that
third episode in a row you've referenced that.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I don't like Josh Allen. This is an anti-Josh Allen podcast, ladies.
It is now.
Yeah. So,
okay.
Well, you're a Jets fan. You have to be anti-Josh Allen.
Listen, I try and be unbiased most of the time.
Not on this
Oh,
show.
me, I'm a Bears fan.
Okay, so the question is, what team has the longest drought from their last 11-plus win season?
So you got to think about futility at this point, right?
Ooh, and there's plenty to think about.
Plenty of futility at this point.
Rick, so there's two teams that immediately came to my mind.
Yep, go for it.
The Browns, because did they have 11 wins when they made the playoffs with Baker a few years ago?
Okay.
That's the only thing I don't know. Did they have 10 wins or did they have 11 is the only thing I'm thinking about there.
Well, did they win the division that year or no?
Yes, because they faced the Steelers in a wild card game, I'm pretty sure.
They hosted that, right?
Yeah, and
they went to Kansas City. So
yes.
They probably won 11 then, because I don't know if the AFC North had ever had a 10.
Well, it could have been because remember, I think that was the season of rookie Joe Burrow, and he got hurt partway through the year because the Bengals basically decided, hey, we'll basically just let you be guarded by a bunch of
cardboard cutouts.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And then that was the first of back-to-back seasons where a lower body injury ended Lamar Jackson's season for them, and he was hit out prematurely. They missed the playoffs that time, I'm pretty sure.
Good times. Right. Well, that's the Browns. What's your other team you're thinking of?
The Jets, because the Fitzmagic season was 10 wins. And then before that, were the Jets? Did the Jets get an 11 win season in either of those two AFC title game appearance seasons?
Well, they were wild card teams, I think, but I think they won the division one of those years, so it's possible. But I think there's a team a little further back than that that I'm thinking of. Yeah, Washington.
Oh, you're right. RG3's rookie season, right?
Well, no, not even that, because I remember we talked about this. Remember that show that we had context to my mind-blowing fact about the Commanders last time they had a shutout?
Yeah. Oh my god.
Well, that was their year. They went 14-2. Remember we talked about that? I can't remember Washington getting to 10 wins, let alone 11, at any point since.
Right, because the two times. Because they won the division 3 times over the last little bit
I think they topped out at 10.
Yeah, because the NFC East. Here's the thing: when the NFC East is bad, it's bad. There have been reasons why the division has been called the NFC least in certain times.
And yet this season it was good.
Yeah. Well, dead clock is right twice a day.
So. There you go. Yeah. Including the doomsday clock, I guess.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think.
That's a really good one. I think Washington is a strong one right there.
Washington's a strong one. You know what the other team I'm thinking of maybe, because I'm thinking about recently, and I think when they went to the AFC title game, they weren't an 11-win team. What about Jacksonville?
Yeah, because they won the AFC South and
another division that's
Yeah, you don't really need to win a lot of games to win the AFC South handily.
It's a good thing I took a sip of that. I almost said a word that Justin would be happy that I said on air, and I didn't do that. Yeah. He's just waiting for the day that I do drop one of those on the air. It's never going to happen. I think Washington or Jacksonville are good shouts.
Yeah,
I really do. I'll take the stab with Washington, my former team.
The Washington Commanders, formerly known as the Washington Football Team, formerly known as the Washington Redskins, are the only team to not have an 11-plus win game season in the 2000s, in the current millennium. Their last 11-plus win season, they were 14-2 in 1991.
Oh my god!
Which was the year they had 3 shutouts in September.
Yes,
that was the last time they had a shutout win.
Yeah, the last time that they had an 11-win season.
Yeah.
And you were very close on the second one. Jacksonville is number 2. And their last 11-win season was 2007. They are the second longest drought. You want to take a stab at the third? It is a team you guys have not said.
Okay, that helps.
See, I did like your Jets thought there. So obviously it can't be them.
Right.
We know this for a fact.
Jets are 4th longest, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who it could be?
Who?
Miami.
You think so?
I mean,
yeah, because
maybe
because the 2 times they've made the playoffs over the last 8 or 9 years, they were not it was not 11-win teams. That's not a bad shout. My other guess, Nah, you know what? Miami's a good shot, Rick. I think so.
Let's roll with it. The Dolphins.
It is. It's the Dolphins in 2008.
Look at that. He's on a roll.
It feels so good to be back.
He's not been on a roll like this since the Harry Potter quiz.
Oh my god, that was the best episode I've ever done trivia wise.
Well, yeah, because
I bought a lottery ticket. I didn't win anything. So
because you aced all the sports trivia that episode, then you aced all the Harry Potter trivia, and then I think you went 2 more weeks where you just got everything. So that was a run.
I was imbued with the spirit of Sandoval just to mess with Justin.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah. But there it is, the
spirit of thing.
The 3 longest teams right there, since they're the 3 teams that have had the longest drought since their last 11-win season: a NFC East team and 2 Florida teams.
And Florida.
Oh.
So if you're asking the question, like on some NFL or some talk shows, did it happen in Florida? The answer is yes.
The answer is
almost.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other 2 are yes, but
yes.
Yeah. So. Yeah. That's a good one right there. Good shout on the trivia there, Justin. A very good one. We're going to have, as I've said, Justin is the games master, and we always do start with games, guys, so we're going to have games like that consistently to start out the show. Do we have more on this episode?
Absolutely. How about a little bit of Would You Rather?
I like it.
Now, I'm going to give you 8 options today.
Oh, my God.
I want to know which team is more likely to go from worst to first.
Hang on. I got to write this down. Hold on. I got to write this down.
Well, we can also just look at the standings from last year.
All 8 teams. I'm going to give you all 8 conference teams.
Worst to first?
And okay. Yep. In last place, the New York Jets, the Cleveland Browns, the Houston Texans, the Denver Broncos or the AFC, and the Washington Commanders, the Chicago Bears, Atlanta Falcons, and Arizona Cardinals.
I think it's not gotta be because
you could say the Jets, but the Jets are in one of the tougher divisions. I mean, Miami and Buffalo are both going to make big runs, and the Jets have a tough schedule. In theory, like with the Aaron Rodgers trade and that defense, they should be, in theory, the highest team. But like, look, there are teams like Atlanta who the majority of their division was tied last year, actually, and they've gotten worse.
Well, that's what right. I was going to say that, Justin. I think, like, all due respect to the Jets, because I think the Jets can finish second in that division at least. I don't have them right now on my first seed. I was going to say the Falcons because I think that we said this the entire time, and when we do our divisional previews, which is probably going to be one of the first 2 or 3 divisions we cover, the NFC South, that is the most wide open division in football this season. And it's because those teams are on a spectrum of any of them could go 3-14 this year, or any of them could randomly pull out a 10-7 win season or 10-7 overall record season. And who the bloody hell knows which team it's going to be. Like, I think it is the Falcons because while there might be questions about Desmond Ridder and Taylor Hennessy, that I know it's Heineke. I like making alcoholic beverage jokes.
No. I thought you had to choke for a second there.
No. If I didn't get it this past week, I'm clear for now. But yeah. I think no matter who the quarterback is, you have so much skill position talent that there's no excuse for that offense to not perform to a high level. You have Bijan Robinson and you have Tyler Algier as the running back tandem right there. You have Drake London as the number 1 wide receiver on that team. Is he a bona fide number 1 in this league? No, but he's the number 1 on that team that you have to work with. You have Cordell Patterson. You have Kyle Pitts, the tight end, who you're hoping can have a breakout season because he had a great rookie year. Do that hot in year 2, sophomore slump year, to say the least. You have a really good offensive line. For as team as bad as they are, they have a really good offensive line in terms of like 3 of their 5 guys are on long-term definitive deals. 2 of them are Pro Bowl caliber players in the left tackle Matthews and their guard Lindstrom. And then you have a defense that was it great last year? No, but I mean they have a number 1 caliber corner, which most teams can't say. And they made defensive acquisitions to this team. Ironically, 2 of the guys that they signed in free agency on the defensive line, former Saints players. So you took from a divisional rival there to improve your defense. It's hard-pressed for me to look at the other teams that finished last and think that they're going to end up finishing first because you said it, Justin, the divisions are so tough. You have teams that are in divisions that are so stacked. Like, I can't consider the Jets, but the division is so tough. I think second place is the best for them. I'm definitely not picking the Broncos. The Texans in the AFC South, it's going to be difficult because while they did add a lot of young talent, it's a first-year head coach. It's them having to figure things out. It's us seeing if CJ Stroud can be the guy. I think I knocked out the entirety of the AFC there. right? Oh wait, who was last in the AFC North? The Browns.
Browns.
So I can ignore them. But then in the NFC, you have in the North.
Might not be so easy to ignore this year. I mean, if Deshaun can come back and play anything like he was, and Lamar being inconsistent, the Steelers having a good defense but still not being an offensive. Oh yeah, the Bengals. Never mind. Go on.
Thank you, Joey B, baby, TikTok king. But then you have the Bears, who, all due respect, Rick, I don't think they're going to win that division, despite the fact that you could kind of argue maybe that's the next most wide open division in that conference, because then the NFC East and the NFC West both have multiple teams that made the playoffs. 5 of the 7 teams that made the playoffs last year were from the NFC East and the NFC West combined. Like,
right.
Pretty good to say the very least.
Right. So, yeah, I think Atlanta is the best option here. Denver, if you believe in Sean Payton's wizardry, is also a good possibility here. The Jets are a good option there too, but I think Atlanta is the number one. But let me spin a narrative if I can. If all you need to really do is win 6 games in your division to hold a tiebreaker, in a sense, and to be the team that wins the division and have 6 games going in there, then theoretically speaking, at any given year, any team could win a division, right? In theory. So let's look at this. The Colts are starting Anthony Richardson for some reason. I'm not really 100% sure why, but he probably is the least pro-ready of the quarterbacks from the first round this year that we've seen. The Titans are trash, and we know this for a fact. The Jaguars, while they were good last year, let's also not overlook the fact that Trevor Lawrence had 4 interceptions in the first half of that playoff game. So they could be ripe, and it's a very scary proposition here, but it could be ripe for a Texans team to go 7-9 and yet win that division. There's some odd things that can happen in the sport of football. So don't discount them, because the rest of that division, I know Jacksonville's good, but which Jacksonville are we getting? The one that climbed their way back into relevancy, or the team that is supposed to be good but falters? And you have a Texans team that no one's counting on making an inspiring, because again, if your threshold is 7 or 8 and you're a team that believes you can win your entire division, then you've only got 2 other games that you have to win this season. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Texans, I believe, have to play the Cardinals at some point this year. Oh, no, Tampa Bay, and then Carolina, and then Cleveland, and Arizona as well. The Texans could be a team that could sneak in there. And again, it's not the team that you think of immediately, but if their rookies pan out the way that they expect them to pan out, if CJ Stroud really proves out to be that guy, then maybe they could be that sneaky 4 seed that gets bounced in the first round. But hey, they made a wild card game. They hosted a wild card game that nobody expected them to host. So it's, like I said, it's a narrative. I don't truly believe it's going to happen, but it is fun to think about in a way, because again, as crazy as the NFC South is going to be this year, and it's going to be crazy, we agree with that. The AFC South, to quote a certain DC supervillain, is just one bad day away from madness. That would be the Joker, by the way. Quoting the Joker. So, there you go. Could be the Texans. And we could be sitting here in January 2024 saying to ourselves, well, who the hell picked that? So,
you.
I'm surprised no one picked the Bears here.
Well, again, I do think the Bears will finish 3rd this year, possibly 2nd, but I think the Lions are so talented that the Vikings are so fraudulent that you can only really hope for a 2nd or 3rd place finish for Chicago.
Look, the Lions are very good at what they do, but they have their deficiencies.
Yeah.
I think the same could be said for Minnesota. The Bears are a wild card. You don't really know what to expect from them. You expect the Packers' defense to be good. You expect Minnesota's offense to be good. You expect Detroit to be able to put up a lot of points and have a fearsome defensive line. But there's a lot going for all the teams in that division recently now that Aaron Rodgers has gone there. So I was surprised that nobody picked them. And by the way, there was only 2 teams in the AFC South that had a winning record in their division: Bill Jaguars and the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because the Colts were just a cluster last year.
Yeah.
We all swung and missed on that one.
No, I didn't think that. I didn't understand the Matt Ryan trade at the beginning. Like, he had plenty of weapons in Atlanta, and things were not working out.
So wait, then who did you have winning the division last year?
Last year?
Yeah. Did you have Tennessee? Because you didn't have Jacksonville.
No, I think it was the Colts, but I didn't think that they were going to win by a mile. I think that I had them at 9-8, and I thought that they were going to rely heavily on their defense and run game.
We still thought they were going to win the division.
Yeah, look, I didn't expect them to have all the injuries that they did also, but
I will say
I was not a huge fan of Matt Ryan.
I will say this: upon mental reevaluation, I probably would put the Bears as second place on this list definitively, because I think, like Rick said, the Lions are going to be a heavy favorite for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to put money down on Detroit to win the division this year.
Absolutely.
And I think, despite how I feel about their quarterback, overall talent wins in this league. And I think there's still enough on the Minnesota Vikings that you can argue that there is the talent there for them to win this division. Not as comfortably as they did last season.
We'll
but
see if they cut in the next couple of days.
Yeah,
look.
Fair point.
I'll just end the discussion here. My acquaintance Adam Rank cursed the Bears by giving them 12 wins this year in the offseason. So it ain't gonna happen.
Okay. Anyways, we'll move on. Something else.
Although I will say this, I do want to just say this last point about it. Like, if you are picking a team that I think has the most attributes of teams in the past that we've seen surprise us, I think this Bears team would be that. A young, electrifying, talented quarterback who especially is able to make plays with both his arm and his legs. A skill position group that has a really good wide receiver in DJ Moore. A defense that might surprise us with how talented they are, and they still have a veteran in that defensive back room in Eddie Jackson that is, I think, has been not talked about enough the last few years because, I mean, God, the Bears are bad, but that's still one of the, top 5-6 safeties in the game of football?
Yeah.
And they added some young talent on that defense. I don't want to rule the Bears out entirely. There are the makings of it. It's just we need to see which specific players are going to step up on that team. I will say this. I think they're in a better position than the Texans are. The Texans, I think, are just youth, but not a lot of direction. I think now that Matt Eberflus is going into, year 3 with the team? Year 2? Year 2, I think he figured out how to best have Justin Fields work the offense last season, which I think is the biggest thing of them all. If he was, I already said this last year, if he was still going to have Justin Fields try to be a traditional quarterback last year, I'd have freaking fired him. But he finally said, he can run. Let's do that. And look, sometimes it's just that simple. You don't need to reinvent the goddamn wheel on every possession, unless you're Matt Nagy as a head coach. But you're
go back Canada.
Get him out.
Go back to Canada. All right.
Has he ever been to Canada?
He should, and stay there.
For coach the CFL. All right. Anyways, that was an outstanding would you rather right there, Justin. Worst to first is always a fun discussion to have, and I think we listed probably the main teams that most people would consider just because of the divisional situation. So that was a good one. Do we have a fact or fiction, or shall we be moving on?
Absolutely. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right. Bryce Young will be Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Ooh. See, this sort of correlates because we will be mentioning Carolina Panther and our breakout candidates here in a bit.
Oh, man. This is tough. This is a tough one.
So let's consider some of the highly drafted and highly touted offensive players from this draft. Obviously, outside of the quarterbacks,
Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson, I think him and Bryce Young are going to be the top 2 favorites to come away with that award. I know I did mention the Falcons, and I know Tyler Algier is talented. He had 1,000 yards last year. I think people are discounting how good he is.
Yep.
But there's a reason Bijan Robinson went as high as he did. I feel bad for him because he's not going to get a second contract when he gets screwed over 4 or 5 years down the line. But that's 4 or 5 years down the line. In the meanwhile, he is a electrifying player. He is a very highly touted running back. A running back that people would have considered to actually legitimately pick in the top 10 is a rarity in today's game. And the fact that Bijan Robinson was that, and not out of BS or narrative, legitimately pure talent This is why I get mad about the running back conversation. We're talking about pure talent. Bijan Robinson, on a pure talent perspective, is one of the top 5 to 10 players in this draft class.
Mm-hmm.
Then obviously we have to consider everything else, and then poor guy's not going to get a second contract. But just based off of pure talent, he is that good.
Yes.
You're going to be hard pressed to convince me who should get Offensive Rookie of the Year aside from Bryce Young or Bijan Robinson. Because again, I'm not convinced that Anthony Richardson should be starting day one.
Stroud?
I think there's going to be a lot of struggles with that because Stroud, my thing is that who is the veteran wide receiver that's going to be that nice crutch for him to throw the ball to? In Carolina, there's Adam Thielen there. There's tight end by committee. There's a decent running room. They added Miles Sanders. I think there's a legitimate plethora of weapons there. Bobby Trees ain't doing it for me, lads, when it comes to that. No disrespect to CJ Stroud. I think CJ Stroud, again, is good, but there's a reason why I was going to be fearful for a Texans quarterback in some way, shape, or form.
So Young, Stroud, Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
Who you're not a fan of, and that
about the receivers.
Hold on.
No. What I mean by that is not a fan of the pick.
Yes.
We made that high.
Hashtag Jurg loves running backs.
Yes.
So let's make that clear.
The 4 receivers down. See,
I was going to say, do you not eliminate, but do you consider any of these receivers as likely to win Offensive Rookie of the Year this time? I don't know if we're going to get a wide receiver class of the likes of Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and guys like that this year. They could still be good, but I don't know if any of them are going to win.
As good as that class, they just have to be better than everyone in their own class.
But the problem is, if they weren't already on stacked teams, that would be the question. Because the thing that worked for Garrett Wilson was that his only other option was Corey Davis.
Yeah,
that's what worked for Garrett. The thing that worked for Chris Olave was that Michael Thomas was hit or miss, and who else did they have?
Well, Michael Thomas is also injured every other week.
Exactly. So that works against JSN and Quentin Johnston because Jackson Smith and Jigba's on Seattle. You already have DK Metcalf there, who is your number one.
And Tyler Lockett.
And Tyler Lockett as well. And Quentin Johnston is in the Chargers. You already have a plethora of wide receivers that are there. So it's not so much their talent isn't there for the wide receiver core. It's the fact that they're not in positions where they're going to be immediate contributors right away.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how I see them shaking out here. I believe it's between Young and Bijan Robinson. However, I would like to make a potential case for an outside option in Dalton Kincaid.
Okay.
Because Dawson Knox, I think, is still good for Buffalo, but there's something about Dalton Kincaid that I think is really going to be a high mark for their offense. So I think he's a guy that could be a good answer for this one as well.
Do you think, and maybe this is more dark horse than that, because he's definitive tight end number 1 in Vegas, whereas it's going to be twin tight end sets in Buffalo for Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, Michael Mayer? Because yes, we could say what we want about Josh McDaniels in that offense, but if there's one thing I think McDaniels' offense likes to have, it's a tight end. And it's who's the number 2 guy on that team?
Who's the quarterback?
Yeah, well, that's true. Who's the quarterback?
Well, when Tom Brady's throwing him the ball, he's going to get 900 yards. So
Tom Brady won't be there. It is Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs.
Let me restate my case. Michael Mayer is the number 2 option on that team passing wise.
He might be, but look, I don't necessarily believe that that's going to be a high-powered offense. It's an offense that, while they were very high-powered at times last year, they also struggled a lot. I mean, you go back to that Saints game. The Saints were not lighting the world on fire last year, but the Raiders went into the Superdome or the Mercedes-Benz Dome or whatever it's called now, and they didn't make it past the midfield line until the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, they had one of the worst offensive games I've ever seen. And, now I know they have a different quarterback now. It's not like Jimmy Garoppolo is known for moving the ball down the field very, very often. They run heavy. He's not going to necessarily find these guys down the field. Devontae Adams, we'll see. I'm sure he's not really thrilled. It's come out that he's not thrilled about the direction that offense is going. So
isn't it wild that we could legitimately be having a conversation of Adams being dealt at this year's deadline if they're bad? If the Raiders are 1-5, do you think Adams finishes the season with them?
Yes, I think that contract is hard to trade, and it's possible that they get rid of him, but if he's going to get moved, it's likely going to be at the end of the season. By the way, speaking of the Raiders, Did you see the rumor that came out where they were talking about the Randy Moss trade that they were going to make with the Packers back in the day?
I did not.
There was a rumor that came out that said there was a deal that was in place and almost agreed upon that would have sent Randy Moss to the Packers for Aaron Rodgers. And then the Raiders, who would have had a quarterback then, would not have taken DeMarcus Russell, but Calvin Johnson.
Are you telling me?
Wow.
That's the rumor that I saw over the week.
Are you telling me that in an alternate? You know what?
You would have had Favre and Moss, which would have been a combination on its own, and then you could have had Rodgers and
Calvin Johnson.
Although you don't know what Rodgers would have been on that coaching staff because apparently he was a project in Green Bay as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the
wow.
That was the supposed rumor.
Wow.
I mean, what was the Raiders quarterback room in 07? Do you think Rodgers would have started, or would they have sat him for one more year?
He would have been the starter the next year because they started Jamarcus Russell the next year.
No. But I'm saying, so remember, the Randy Moss got traded before the 2007 regular season. Rodgers didn't start playing until 08. So
but he didn't start playing until 08 because Favre was there.
No. But what I'm saying is that would they have chosen to sat Rodgers for one more year? Would he have started right away in 07? Do you think?
Over who?
No, that's why I'm asking Justin. Who the hell was on the Raiders in 07?
My argument is that he would have started right away because who were they starting? They didn't. Whatever they did, they gave it up for Jamarcus Russell.
Yeah.
So it's not like anyone that was there was going to be beating out a young Aaron Rodgers.
But wait, hold on. Here's the thing. Would Aaron Rodgers have been good enough so they wouldn't have gotten the first overall pick?
I don't know. Well, if it was a midseason trade and they were down that bad, then I don't remember what was the let's look at the records of the teams that year.
Well, because hold on, because we're talking about it was the 2007 regular season that had that 16-0 Patriots team going into 08. I remember because 2008 was the year I graduated from 5th grade, and like that trade happened before the season. So we're talking about that Aaron Rodgers would have been a Oakland Raider before the start of that season, and he would have gone into the season, probably end up winning the job. Would Aaron Rodgers with that 07 team have been good enough for them to avoid the first overall pick? And what about a top 2 pick at any point? Because then you have to ask with how bad the Lions were. Would the Lions have gone for Jamarcus Russell? Had they gotten number 1 and the Raiders at 2? It's a fun what if, but like there are still a lot of factors there that would have.
No, the Lions, remember what happened with Joey Harrington. They wouldn't go for a quarterback that early again.
So,
well, they went for a quarterback the next year, didn't they? Or was it the year after?
Well, I think it was the year after that, but Stafford versus Jamarcus Russell is a totally different, conversation.
Fair, but would they have looked at themselves being like, "Damn, we could get Jamarcus Russell over Joey Harrison"? Like, I don't know, Rick.
Again, I think the aspect of the lead up to the draft with Jamarcus Russell, the stories about that with the blank DVDs kind of tells you the story of how.
Well, no, the blank DVDs was after he became an NFL player.
I know, but I'm saying that would also be like a dodge. Like Detroit would just been like, thank God we missed that. Okay, Robert Gallery, you're our number 1 pick. Let's go.
Yeah, but ultimately, hindsight's 2020. So
yeah, that's fair.
It's a fun what if. Trust me, I love the what if realm. I'm actually going to be doing a fun what if scenario with a couple coworkers here in a few days or a week or so when it comes to NBA stuff. Like what ifs are fun. I think we should have a what if episode for the hell of it. But I think there are some like scenarios there where it's like we kind of have to play in fact of like if Rodgers is there, what would the numbers look like and stuff like that. It would be tough to simulate, but it is fun. Anyways, we somehow went from Bryce Young to Aaron Rodgers on the Oakland Raiders in 2007.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
The tales this podcast weaves. I'll just say Bryce Young.
You brought up Michael Mayer, which went to Oakland, which went to trading Devontae Adams. I'm sorry, Oakland, Vegas. And then trading Devontae Adams, who was a Packer and was traded to the Raiders. And then I saw that rumor.
Justin, don't
Rodgers would have been in Oakland. Or brought 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Makes sense.
Exactly. Justin, don't apologize for confusing Vegas and Oakland and Vegas right there because the baseball team is about to go to Vegas anyway. So it's not the only thing that Oakland is losing here.
Still there. It's still a thing.
For now. I'll just say Bryce Young's going to win Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I'll let go of that. That's fine. I'll let go of that.
The tales that we've done this show is absolutely outstanding.
Yep.
Good factor fiction right there, Justin. I always appreciate you, bud. You absolutely
Thank
crushed it on that one. Rick, do we have a mind-blowing fact before we get to the main entree of the show?
We do, gentlemen. And it's also a bit of a story here. So, you know that in football and in lacrosse and in hockey, you can get penalties for having too many men on the field of play because of constant substitutions. Well, have you ever heard about being penalized for too many men on a roster? That's what happened to the Houston Oilers in the year 1973. Now, it was a bad year for Houston. They went 1-13 that year. It was also a weird year in sports. Willie Mays was on the Mets, so, neither here nor there. But back then, so, the last cut, when we do cut down day in the NFL, we get to the final active roster. It's like 53 man, right? Back in the 70s, it was 47. And so Houston was going through a time where they were terrible. And their owner, Bud Adams, had a general manager named Sid Gilman on the team. Well, there was a point during the middle of the season where Sid Gilman decided to fire the head coach and become the head coach. So if you think Bill O'Brien was the only one to do it, go back into the Houston annals of football. Needless to say that at that time, the NFL investigated Houston for having too many men on the roster, on the active payroll, if you will. And it's not by one or two. Oh, no. So the list was 47, right? Houston at one point listed 68 guys on their active roster. And now the reasoning was that 21 of those players were, quote, hidden away. So I guess they forgot there was an inactive list at the time here. My bad. Were they put on a submarine or something?
No, how did they get hidden?
First of all, too soon. Secondly, no, I actually have a very good quote here from the well-noted San Francisco Chronicle sports writer Wells Twombly, who said, most of the bartenders in downtown Houston were actually reserve tackles or spare pass rushers. That's a joke. So clearly that's who the 21 guys were. So needless to say that Bud Adams, the owner, the late Bud Adams, was actually fined $15,000 due to this poor math and accounting skills. Now, did this help Houston at all? No, they went 1-13 for the second year in a row. So it is true. You can be penalized for having too many men on the roster, apparently.
Do you think Bud Adams, punished the team in some way because it's like, you guys cost me money?
Bud Adams is a dirtbag anyways.
Because I was going to say, at the end of the day, this is Bud Adams we're talking about. This is not necessarily the the squeakiest clean of owners, ladies and gentlemen.
No, he is not.
No.
Guy who owned the Nashville Cats at the Arena Football League.
If there's anything that this mind-blowing fact taught me, first off, once again, good fact, Rick. If there's anything this mind-blowing fact taught me, it's the fact that Houston football team, guy having both general manager and coaching role, collision course.
Doesn't work.
It clearly
doesn't work.
We have multiple generations of Houston football fans that are like, this whole coach having the roster management role.
Yeah.
It just ain't a good idea, huh?
I do want to have a quick follow-up to this. Bud Adams was also fined $250,000 in 2009 by Roger Goodell.
Why?
Because in 2009, I forget what week it was. It was November 15th of 2009, and the Titans beat the Bills 41-14 in the game. Bud Adams was caught on video flipping the bird to the Buffalo bench. And wait, it gets better. He was asked, about the fine. He said, I was just so happy we won. I knew I was going to get in trouble, but I was so happy we won, so I just did that anyways. Great. Good job, Bud Adams.
Yeah.
Good job.
Hey, that guy, there's something there. Again, maybe it'll be a segment during the NFL season. We got to go back in the annals of history, and we got to just take a team from a year, and we just got to analyze their situation because it's fun. Because we talked about that before, the 2010 Packers. I think we talked about.
Well, that's what the Rand Podium started off as. We reviewed the Seattle Seahawks that 1 week, so
it's very true.
Yeah, so we can go back and do that.
So Seattle, you birthed the Rand Podium.
It's true. Well,
I'm not sure if that's something for them to take pride in, but I like to think they probably would in some way, shape, or form.
Well, it's the Rand Podium or the Sonics, and you picked that one instead. So there you go.
Wow, that's a rough one to say the very least. All right. Speaking of which, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to the main course of the show now that the fun is finished. That had some football intertwined there. Let's get straight into the football. Let's get straight to the main topic of this episode, which is our breakout player candidates. So, for any of you that have watched us since last year, how the hell have you made it this far? But also, thank you. You guys know that during the summer last season, we had an episode where we talked about breakout player candidates, and we had a couple interesting names on that list. We had Cole Kmet on that list. We had Pittman, we had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, we had Ojulari from the Giants on that list, I want to say. Is there anyone else on that list that sticks out to you boys that I'm forgetting off the top of my head?
Not really. I mean, it was so long ago that I forgot.
I remember, yeah.
Fair shout.
Guys.
Fair shout.
Clearly didn't do very well.
So for that, we are going to take another stab at it and see if maybe, just maybe, we may or may not know what the hell we're talking about on this podcast when it comes to football. But in all seriousness, I think one of the fun things, boys, and I think I want to throw the idea to Justin, because off-season, you know this, Justin, like off-season is the time of hope and, positive attitude going into the season. I think the one thing we all love as fans, no matter if the player's on our team or not, is the idea of new breakout players coming into the league and just absolutely going by storm, having a career year, going off. So what do you think about the idea of breakout players and how fascinated we are with that, Justin? Because like this is a podcast topic du jour. Literally, we're doing a second episode about this in the history of the podcast lifetime.
So it's big, especially for teams that haven't had a ton of success, because again, it represents hope. It represents, hey, my team did something right. There's a place for us to build upon. I mean, just look at it with the Jets. I mean, they had a fantastic draft this last season with Sauce Gardner in the first round and Garrett Wilson in the first round and Breece Hall in the second round. And they still got some players that did okay and have a good chance of breaking out this year. So look, if you're not going to win games, you at least got to hope that you have players that you could root for. And these guys just might have what it takes to take their team to the next level.
Absolutely. And, Rick, you especially know this as a Bears fan. You're expecting a couple of breakouts on your team this year, are you not?
Always, man. Listen, it's all about excellent, strong play from a lot of the guys in their second year or in their third years, whatever it is. The new additions that the Bears have too, looking for a lot from DJ Moore. A full season of Chase Claypool in Chicago would be great. The running game with Khalil Herbert's going to be huge. And again, it all starts with Justin Fields at the quarterback. So, it would be nice to see the Bears put together a few wins. And see, going back to our discussion about, the worst at first, I think they're a year away.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think this is their year, but I think they're going to do a lot better than people have them put down. Not 12 wins, though, but they're close.
Yeah. A little bit more realistic than some people have. So with that being said, guys, it is time for our breakout player list, but we're not just going to go in some kind of, random order, in some written down order that we have on like a notes app on our phone. No. We do this a special way here on the show.
There it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is the return of the Wheel of Chaos. It's been a long time. Its debut on the new YouTube channel. Have at it. So on that wheel, on that beautiful, beautiful wheel there, that is ironically Packers colors. If I could switch it, I would, but I haven't figured that out yet. Maybe one day. We have a list of 12 players, 6 offense and 6 defense that we ironed out just before the show started here. Someone wasn't present to that show meeting. I won't say who. We have a ironed out list here of these guys. And look, as has been done on the show many of times, which includes point multipliers to mascots on a weekly pick basis on all things, we are going to let the wheel decide our fate and decide the order of which we are going to speak about these particular players. And very quick rapid fire discussion on if we really believe they're going to have a breakout season here in 2023 or not. So, gentlemen, let's begin.
Episode was the our original one. I'm trying to find it. That way I'll be able to tell you who was with what and where.
Wow.
One of our late ads.
I think the latest addition that we made onto the list actually in the pre-show meeting. So there we go. Yeah. So Rondale Moore, come on down. But in all actuality, Rondale Moore of the Arizona Cardinals, entering his third season, coming into the league from the 2021 draft. Very much a guy coming in where speed was the main crux of his game. Can get down the field 20, 25, 30 yards and can, in theory, make a couple plays. And he made a play or two here and there for Kyler Murray over the last couple seasons, but never really a ton of consistency on the Cardinals as a whole. And now, to be fair, you could say that about a lot of players on this team. The talented receivers on paper that the Cardinals have lost over, I think, the last 3 to 4 seasons, it's kind of crazy, all things considered. I think there have been some guys who could have really had and done something in their career or had a decent career, and the Cardinals just didn't figure out how to use them. I think Andy Isabella is a guy who I think should have been a bona fide slot wide receiver extraordinaire in this league, and he was not. There's a wide receiver who he just popped in my brain. I'm forgetting his name, but he was like, I want to say like 6'4", on the Cardinals a couple of years ago. Tall guy, can jump for the ball. They didn't figure out how to get him involved in the offense at all. This Cardinals team has wasted talent the last couple of years. Now, Cliff Kingsbury's gone. So maybe was that the crux of it? Who knows? But Justin, I'll start this off with you. I'll throw it over about you. Rondale Moore, what will be the keys to him being successful here in 2023 for the Cardinals?
Well, consistent quarterback play for one. I mean, we don't know when Kyler's coming back. We don't know who the starter is. It's assumed that it's going to be Colt McCoy. But if we're talking about Breakout as an improved season, listen, he had 400 and something yards last year and 1 touchdown. And we don't really know who's going to be there this year. I mean, there's no DeAndre Hopkins. They have James Conner there, who's generally hurt, but he's going to take a bulk of the carries. They have Zach Ertz there, who I would think is likely now going to be a trade candidate for the second time in his career. And you got Hollywood Brown, who also spends a lot of time on the injured list. So I think that there's a good chance that he has a significant bump in usage, if not just for the fact that he will have a significant bump in yards, but there's a good chance that he's also seeing a lot of double coverage, and he's the only one that is really going to have a lot of focus in that secondary. So it's going to be tough for him to break out this year, but if there's anyone on the Cardinals, I would think it's got to be him.
Right, and you kind of mentioned it. When it comes to bad teams, and maybe I feel like we talk about this idea more in maybe the NBA is the first sport that comes to my mind. Empty calorie stats in terms of, someone on a bad team needs to get the usage, right? Now, I think obviously it's much easier in basketball for a player to be able to accomplish that. In football, especially at a wide receiver position, it's all about the talent of the quarterback that's throwing to you and them actually throwing you the goddamn football. But I think when it comes to the Cardinals, I think this is a team that's going to be so talent-starved this particular season. I feel like for the Cardinals, I think they're in an area where the Texans have been the last couple of years, where I feel like a lot of the guys on this team are just going to be they're going to be competing for their long-term future of their NFL careers here, and whether or not they're going to be NFL players on rosters for the next couple of years, or if they're going to be XFL players or USFL players here over the next couple of seasons. And I don't think Rondale Moore is a guy that should be cut. That's not what I'm trying to say. I think Rondale Moore is talented, obviously, but ultimately, there have been a couple things that have gone against him so far in this Cardinals time. And I think the biggest detractor to what could be a good 2023 will be the fact that there's no Kyler Murray, because I think this could have been the season now. Rondale Moore, we were talking about this before the show started, Rick. Rondale Moore's basically wide receiver 2 on paper for the squad. And he's going to get the volume. I don't think that's a question, but now it's about the production. So what do you think, Rick, about the odds of Rondale Moore having a really good 2023 as this Cardinals team just doesn't know what its future is going to look like beyond this season?
No, so Rondale Moore came into the league in 2021 on an Arizona team that featured A.J. Green and Christian Kirk. So there you go. And then the following year with D-Hop, and then Pharaoh Cooper was there as well. Rondale Moore was the guy who beat out Andy Isabella, sent him back into Baltimore. But you're right. You look at that wide receiver room. After Hollywood Brown, it's Moore, it's Zach Pascal, it's Greg Dortch, if you want to go that far. It's the rookie they got, Michael Wilson, who I was not really high on as well. Arizona needs consistency. Even if they have horrible quarterback play, which they're probably going to have, they need somebody who's going to be able to catch the ball on a consistent basis. And look, we still have not had a full year of Rondale Moore, because last year he missed the first 3 games, played I think the next 9 or 10, and then went on IR in December. So he's got to get a full season under his belt, and got to prove that he is the target. He is the guy that many people thought he was coming out in 2021. He could have been a late first round pick, because of the dearth of wide receivers that year in that draft. He fell to the second, and so now's the time really for him. And I think, it doesn't really matter so much. It does, but it doesn't really matter so much, because the person throwing the ball may change, but the scheme stays the same. And there's veritable 4 guys in that quarterback room for Arizona who have experience slinging the ball at the NFL level or at the collegiate level, because Clayton Tune is a rookie who's coming out this year. But I think for here Rondale Moore, you have to prove consistency and you have to prove reliability. And if he doesn't do that, then again, I won't surprise me, because look, Arizona, we've talked about them being in line for one of the top 2 picks. And one of the top 2 picks next year is Marvin Harrison Jr. And he'll probably bump out Rondale Moore, provided that Moore does not have the season that he needs to. So this is a must break out for Rondale Moore. This is a must run. He has to do really well to either get himself a bigger contract or keep his job afloat.
Yeah, and he is not. I don't think he's eclipsed 500 yards yet in a season in his career. This is a guy that coming in with some expectations, being a later round pick at wide receiver, but still has an electricity that really, hindsight 2020, you would have thought on paper should have worked in the Cardinals offense with Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. But I mean, obviously, as that spool has been unraveled, Lord knows that the Cliff Kingsbury offense is something that Kyler Murray, the fact that he made it work in any modicum of a way during his career so far is a wonder. But now it's Gannon being the head coach there, and what the hell kind of offense is he going to run is the question with his offensive coordinating staff. And really, what is his offensive coordinator going to run? Because I'm going to be real with you, I don't think Jonathan Gannon is going to be any kind of hands-on. I think this is the complete opposite philosophy where, and this is what teams tend to do, you tend to hire the coach that's the opposite of the guy you just fired. So Cliff Kingsbury, very hands-on on the offensive side of the ball, very much, wanting to start games with his set plays and his schemes and all that. Now you're going to have a guy in Gannon that, I don't think he's going to have any influence in the offense this year. Maybe not. I shouldn't say not any, but he's going to let his offensive coordinator call the majority of the game. You don't think so?
And so by that logic, then, when Gannon does get fired, the inverse of Kingsbury being in Thailand is being in the Faroe Islands, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
makes sense. Yeah, okay.
Lincoln Riley, for future Cardinals coach, confirmed.
Oh, dear Lord.
Obviously not. But Rondale Moore, potential for 2023. Again, this is a guy that deserves to be on the list because, he's going to get the touches. He's going to get the opportunity. If he does end up staying healthy, he's going to get plenty of opportunities because, someone has to catch a goddamn football on this team. The Cardinals can't be shut out every game. Maybe they will.
Well, they could be.
Yeah, I was going to say, they probably will be at least once or twice. But in theory, they need to win some football games. So someone has to get some production there. And Rondale Moore is a pretty good pick because, it's him and Hollywood Brown. And like Justin said, Zach Ertz is probably going to get traded again, which I would be surprised if that doesn't happen before the season because I think he probably should be traded soon enough. All right, anyways, back to the wheel. And let's go for a second spin around.
Yeah, apologies to Julie Ertz with that one because your husband's going to get moved around again while you're winning the World Cup again this summer. Or in the fall. In New Zealand.
Huh? Ooh.
Defense.
God, I love that jingle. We now move over to the defensive side of the ball. It will be really entertaining if we do end up going back and forth here. But of course, as everyone knows, or as we've said, the wheel decides all on this show. So, pray to the wheel. Nakobe Dean is going to be the next guy that we're going to talk about as per the spin of the wheel. Nakobe Dean, as we know, a guy who fell in his respective draft last year in 2022, a guy that a lot of people were very high on for good reason, still an extremely talented player, going to be an extremely talented player, I think, for a long time to come. Didn't get a lot of playing time on Philadelphia Eagles last season, but there's a reason for that. I think part of the reason, if memory is serving me correctly here, boys, is that Nakobe Dean kind of fell in the draft because there was a bit of an injury concern with him in the draft process that ended up making a stock less than what it was, but he ends up going to an Eagles team that is so stacked all around defensively, he didn't really need to play a lot on that team. And he got a little bit of playing time here and there. I want to say he finished his rookie season overall with about 13, 14 tackles or so, maybe a little bit more than that, but at least just on paper, that's what I think the final number was. He didn't do a lot on the field, but obviously for a young guy like him to have been in that locker room, to learn from the defensive guys in that locker room, just mounds of veteran experience that team had, and for them to go on that deep playoff run, for him to see what winning football is like, I think is probably, you could argue, maybe just as, if not more valuable, just for the learning experience for his NFL career than what could have been a rookie season for him last year. So, Rick, I'm going to throw this one to you first. Nakobe Dean, this being the year where he absolutely just breaks out and starts to show why he was as highly touted as he was coming into his respective draft.
Well, he's got to make the defense first and foremost, because last year he did play in all 17 games, but primarily as special teams, because he was undersized because of those injury concerns. He deems himself to be, a unicorn. And I know we hate throwing that word around a lot when talking about, athletes now. I think it's kind of getting overused. But, yeah, Philadelphia, especially now this year with the fact that they have Jalen Carter and the fact that they have Nolan Smith, I mean, Nakobe Dean has to really improve himself and show that he can be that guy to stay on the field, because right now the Philadelphia Eagle defense is kind of passing him by in a sense. I mean, this is a guy who was touted first round, slipped out into the third, went into a good situation, and again, didn't really play a whole lot because he had a torn pec. He did not get surgery for it, which, the Eagles said you should get surgery for it, and he said, nah, I'm good. And so then it's like, well, if you're not going to, listen and you're going to try and do your own thing and you injure yourself further, that's on you. So this is one of those ones where it's a bit of a question mark for me, because, yeah, he definitely has the talent and the skill, but does he have the attitude and the acumen to really be that next standout linebacker for Philadelphia? And I'll be honest with you, again, like I said, they drafted really well this year. I think we all agree that Philadelphia had the best draft this season. Does that mean that they basically have passed by Nakobe Dean here in this sense? I think the fact that they have added guys like Hassan Reddick is there, who's a monster in the linebacking core. The fact that their defensive line is also impeccable, with Derek Barnett, Fletcher Cox still there. Again, Jalen Carter, who they just added, who probably was the top prospect of this year's draft. I can see Dean being stuck in special teams for a bit until he proves that he's a guy who can be on an every down linebacker, but I don't see that being the case yet.
Interesting. Very interesting to say the least. Yeah, Rick, what I did like that you mentioned there is the idea of him being a unicorn, because we're starting to get a couple of these guys, mainly on the defensive side of the ball, obviously, when it comes to they were coming into the draft and they played linebacker, but they also played defensive end and they also played defensive back. That was the case last year. One of the guys we actually talked about in our breakout candidate list of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. And that was actually a guy who we talked about a couple weeks ago on the show when it came to I forget if it was about contract extension or fifth-year options, in Isaiah Simmons. So now this is yet another guy here that we're talking about that in Georgia, obviously played great at that level, won a national championship, is known as a really good player. And if it was Kirby Smart, coaching this team, as we all joke about that he is a low-key a scout for the Philadelphia Eagles, he probably would be playing. But I think you bring up a point there is I think the thing I think would have benefited Isaiah Simmons so much more in his career if it happened much earlier on and eventually happened for Minkah Fitzpatrick is solidifying them playing a majority of the snaps at one position, finding what they're really great at, and you could still move them around a little bit, but having you're a safety, but we will put you at linebacker in certain packages, or you are a linebacker, but because you are so fast in certain drop coverages, we may need you to go deep. Stuff like that, I think is what teams should figure out. And I mean, I think the Eagles coaching staff has proved they could get the best out of players. So Justin, I want to throw the idea of Nakobe Dean to you. What do you think about your thoughts on Nakobe Dean having a season where will he get more playing time this year? Has he earned more playing time with this Philadelphia Eagles team that we did see have a mass exodus of players leave the defensive side of the ball? Is this year where Nakobe Dean makes a statement for himself as being a tantalizing piece on that Eagles defense?
Well, I do think that he's going to get a lot more playing time this year. So he'll have his opportunity to prove it. ESPN does have him listed as the starting middle linebacker on the depth chart. Excuse me. So I expect him to get that kind of usage. Now, whether or not he can actually break out and, assert himself among a laundry list of highly touted players is another story. There's going to be a lot going on there. He's going to have to be close to or lead his team in tackles. He's going to be swarming all over the field and really make his name known. And it's going to be against good teams too, because the Eagles do have a tough schedule. But I do believe in that Eagles coaching staff. For the most part, they've done an excellent job there. I don't really have any complaints there. If they're going to get the best out of a player, I could see Nakobe Dean being that guy.
Makes sense. And again, I think the opportunity for him to do well is there. I think this Eagles team is well set up structurally, well set up roster-wise to where a young defensive player like him should perform well. I mean, if we're kind of being real here, we kind of had this conversation with a different player on that team as well. So I think Nakobe Dean, me personally, I think he will have a pretty good season. Would I classify it as breakout? Sort of. I think he'll have a really good year, but ultimately I think Nakobe Dean making an impact should happen in year 2, because then you got to start asking questions. I think the questions will start to come out more next season, because again, this is an Eagles team that they just made a run. They almost won the Super Bowl, and you need to have players on that team that are contributing. And if you're going to have Nakobe Dean there, he needs to contribute while on that contract, because you only get so much time, especially now you've paid Jalen Hurts. So I think the situation is there for the Eagles to hopefully get some talent out of him and the other guys on that team as well. A lot of Georgia guys. All right, let's move on to the next name on the list, aka who the wheel decides we go. I'll throw this one over to Rick first, because he is the Chicago Bears fan. But Jaquan Brisker has been selected. Rick, obviously, Jaquan Brisker was an amazing pick for the Bears last year. I want to say he was a second rounder, if I'm not mistaken.
He was. Yep.
And he came out, showed himself as a perfect tandem with Eddie Jackson in that secondary. Had, I believe, 1 or 2 interceptions, had a couple passes defended and deflected. Did really good job at finishing tackles. Just a good all-around player. What are you expecting for Jaquan Brisker? Like, what does he need to do to be classified as a breakout candidate in year 2?
So this is a fun one for me, because Brisker's a guy who crossed 100 tackles last year and was really one of the better safeties that they had as a youth player. He had, 4 sacks and a pick, but he also didn't miss a single snap when he was active. But he still characterized the year as a disappointment, because he had a thumb injury that set him back earlier in the year. So if you're a Bears fan, like I am, you love that, because you want him to be on the field every single snap that he can be, and you want him to be able to be better. Now, what are things he can improve on? He said, this is from him specifically, his footwork. Adjusting from being a college safety to a pro safety is a challenge as well. Obviously, Eddie Jackson's got the Liz Frank injury he's come back from, so we'll see how much further he can, progress from that. I think this is a good opportunity for Jaquan Brisker to step forward. And again, how much further can you go from 104 tackles? But what's more about is staying on the field more consistently and becoming the leader that I think he knows he can be. I think Jaquan Brisker is a guy who is Pro Bowl bound this year if he continues the trajectory that he was on, because he's got the tenacity and the hunger for it, the will for it. And again, this Bears team, now you're not playing Aaron Rodgers twice. That's Jordan Love. So feast, Chicago. Feast.
Potentially baby monsters on the midway if they could really build up that defense. But Brisker obviously is a guy that, you need your secondary to be good, especially still in that division, despite the fact that, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to be there. You have a young developing wide receiver core over in Green Bay that maybe they could be really good, led by Watson and Dobbs. You have a Detroit Lions team that's still adding wide receiver talent there, mainly to see, we have to wait 6 games for it, because, someone just couldn't wait to leave the practice facility. But Jameson Williams and that team of receivers. And then, of course, the Minnesota Vikings, for all that we want to say that they're frauds, they're about to pay Justin Jefferson a whole lot of money. And you need to have a secondary that's able to cover. Justin, what do you think about Jaquan Brisker?
I loved him coming out of college. I wanted the Jets to pick him in the 2nd round, and he was there. Obviously, they did not. I don't remember who they picked with that pick, but
not Jaquan Brisker.
Somebody else.
Brisker. But no, I think that he has a chance to be a leader on that team, which is not usually something you see out of a second-year guy. But that is an up-and-coming team. They have made some good positive moves, in my opinion, and it's an area that they will need improvement on. I think he's the guy to do it. I don't know what will quantify a breakout season for a safety, but I do expect him to be better than he was last year, which was already pretty good to start.
Yeah.
Justin, it's funny because I'm looking back at the Jets for first 4 picks before Brisker was taken. It was Sauce, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, and Breece Hall. So you can't be too mad about that, about not getting him.
I thought Brisker was the year before.
No, he was last year.
Was he?
Oh, yeah, it was last year.
Then never mind. I like the way they did it.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been nice, but Sauce.
No, I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Brisker is a safety, though. It's a different position.
Right.
They could have taken
Oh, yeah.
Brisker.
Of course.
Yeah,
But
and I mean,
pretty
ultimately, you kind of mentioned just. I think defensive backs are like one of the ones where it's like it's hard to quantify a breakout because for the most part, people just assume that high interception count means really good player, and while it can, that also just means that they were thrown to a lot. But I think coming away with a couple extra interceptions, but I just think continuing to play that steady role as a safety on that Bears defense, like for as much as we're talking about the Bears offense and what Justin Fields is going to look like, if they're going to be successful, that defense needs to take a step up. And if Jaquan Brisker could be one of like the two, three faces of that defense that really performs well, I think we can consider that as a breakout for Brisker this season. And I think Rick said it best. Pro Bowl should be in his future, just with the way he carries himself, the way he dedicates himself to football. Like this kid is extremely talented. We all loved him coming out the draft. Right? Like we all absolutely loved him. So I think he's going to be in line for a really good year too. Already so young. I tend to not really put guys who just finished their rookie seasons on a list like this, but I think Brisker is one of the rare exceptions where I think he could take that massive leap this season for himself if everything cracks right. So that's how good he is. All right, let's spin the wheel. We've had defense two players in a row now. Will we go back to the offensive side of the ball?
If we do, will it be the guy that I'm sure that Justin and I will rant against?
Well, I think there's at least two players here that Justin will rant against.
No, we're sticking on defense.
Yes, we are. Wow. Roger McCreary of the Tennessee Titans. All right, simply put, kid would have a lot better future if he wasn't a Tennessee Titan. I don't think he's going to have a breakout year because the Titans are, just going to be bad. All right, no.
Moving on.
That's not how I really feel. Had a good amount of tackles last season. I think he had about 80 or so, or close to it. Maybe a little bit higher than that, actually.
84.
So, yeah, it was close. 84 tackles last season. Had an interception or two. A key role in a Tennessee team that needed it last year and didn't get enough of it. But I think, obviously, I don't think anyone will put the blame on Roger McCreary for last season, to say the very least. Justin, it's funny because we just talked about defensive backs. So what constitutes breakouts for defensive backs is a little bit of a tough question. But I think Roger McCreary, he solidified himself as the top two corner on that team specifically. We're just talking about that team. He's going to be one of their starters. And on a team that is kind of on their last legs in terms of some of the key pieces, they need guys to step up. I think Roger McCreary is going to have to be one of the faces of that defense if the Titans are going to make this a bounce-back 2023 campaign for themselves.
Look, I think that he will be a pivotal piece for them to turn it around. Let's face it, their secondary was bad last year. They gave up the most yards. They were tied for the second most touchdowns given up. Only one team had more, which was the Chiefs. They were bad in the secondary last year, and he spent a lot of time with a lot of tackles because he was making up ground. So he might have been great in coverage and whatnot, but the rest of the team was struggling. So they are going to need him to step up. They're going to need some help from his other players in the secondary, his fellow compatriots there, whose names I don't have up in front of me. But if Tennessee wants to get back to the playoffs and, try and step over that hump, they're going to need help, and it's going to need to be from guys like Roger McCreary.
Yeah. Rick, obviously, defense, we just talked about your team, so defensive backs are very important here. And I think when you have a guy like Roger McCreary who came out and had a really good season for himself on a Tennessee Titans team that I think defensive back-wise, I want to say the Titans are pretty good in terms of the defensive backfield for their roster. You're looking at me as if you have questions about the team. No, you don't think so? You think they're weaker than what we're giving credit for?
Their safeties might be okay, but their top two cornerbacks this year going in are going to be Sean Murphy-Bunting, who they just got off Tampa Bay for a one-year deal, and Roger McCreary. They don't have depth. Or they have depth. They don't have enough strong players behind these two guys. So Roger McCreary is going to have to be a big star on defense. Otherwise, Tennessee's going to get torched.
You don't think Christian Fulton and Caleb Farley are that good?
No, I don't.
Really?
I don't think so. Again, I think that this is the Titans team that is going to struggle mightily in coverage unless McCreary is a guy who can break out and be a stronger asset. But it's not. And the thing is too, a lot of what happens on defense happens in concert with the offense, right? Because if your offense stays on the field, defense can get rested. They can come back into play. Well, What happened a lot last year was Tennessee's offense wasn't really able to stay on the field because once Tannehill was out, it went to Malik Willis, who didn't really know what he was doing. He didn't know whether the brake pedal was on the left or on the right of the car, if you will. So, it's one of those things where it's just now you got to hope that Tannehill can at least stay consistent. Or if he's terrible, which we're all thinking he will be, he's our breakdown candidate of the year, by the way. Will Levis can be better. Can Will Levis be better in year one? I don't know. So I think Tennessee might struggle. I think McCreary could have put up good stats. This is the inverse of Rondell Moore, where it's a good player on defense on a defensive backfield that I think is going to be really hard pressed to have a good season this year.
Wow. So he's a good player, but you're going to say because of the situation around him that it might be a tough year for him just because the rest of the roster is not going to be up to snuff, is what you're saying.
Well, statistically, he could have a really good season. And remember, those empty calorie stats, he could be very good because they're not going to throw the ball at him.
Yep.
He's the only player in the secondary. Just throw the ball the other way. He can't cover the whole field.
He's going to be the Michelob Ultra of the secondary. Empty calories.
Oh, Lord. Poor Roger McCreary. You guys tortured him harder than I did, which is very rare for a Tennessee Titans player.
No, it's not that we don't like Roger McCreary. I think we both think that he's a good player. It's just that, again, they were the worst secondary in the league last year.
Yeah, that's
right. They gave up the most yards. They gave up 29 passing touchdowns last year. Oof. They did not have a good year against teams passing the ball. And sure, maybe he could take a step up, but there's only so much one player can do, especially on defense.
Yeah, and especially in the secondary where it's four guys that have to play well, which, to your point, Rick, the safeties are the more established thing there, and the safeties didn't perform that great last year, actually.
No, the safeties didn't perform that well last year either, but at the same time, again, when you look at who their safeties are, there's guys there with reputable names who have very strong, careers behind them. Mike Brown's a very good free safety for them. Kevin Byard. Yep, Amani Hooker, the strong safety. Yeah, so they've got good safeties, but I think it's also telling too they didn't draft secondary at all this year. So
well, could that just be because? Well, I was going to say, could that just be? And this is why I'm asking, because do you think it's just an internal thing that they're expecting? Because I think realistically, I don't think Sean Murphy-Bunting is the number 2 corner on the team. I think that they're expecting Christian Fulton to be the number 2 guy because I think he was second to McCreary in pass deflections on the team. What happened?
He's listed as second on the depth chart on ESPN.
I do. I tend to argue depth chart's a good amount.
Okay. So remember how when we talked in the draft,
on the right side.
Jorg, remember how when we talked in the draft, the recap of the draft, that we made a lot of discussion about the Lions not picking a cornerback.
Yeah.
With their pick, the number 12 pick.
The Titans. Yeah,
Titans didn't either. Titans went Peter Skoronski, and they could have had Emmanuel Forbes or Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Which you pair one of those guys with Roger McCreary, and that changes your secondary completely on its head.
Absolutely.
Now, maybe Christian Fulton can be a good guy, but I don't know.
I don't want to bash him for taking Skoronski. I think that was a good pick.
I think it was a good pick too.
The time Derrick Henry has left.
Well, I think we can bash them if they start playing him at left tackle and not left guard.
We can bash them whenever we want to. It's Tennessee.
Well, fair enough.
I guess, but I'm not going to bash anyone for something that works out.
So I'm always going to bash the Tennessee Titans anyway, just for existing. All right.
I understand.
Yeah, thank you. We'll have that tell-all episode eventually, Justin. Don't you worry.
That's what you should get. You should get a Tannehill jersey.
Tajay Spears over Riley Moss.
We're sending it. Send me your address, Jared. We're sending it to your house.
You act like I'm going to share my address to you. Wow, the defense just keeps on rolling.
Yep. Who is this guy?
All right, Justin, someone who has now faced this guy a couple times so far in the past few seasons, and now maybe he's going to be set up for a pretty decent year 3 for himself here. Jalen Phillips, the defensive tackle of the defensive lineman / edge rusher of the Miami Dolphins. That, funny enough, went to the University of Miami. So Miami kid ended up staying in Miami. Drafted a couple of years ago, has had now 2 seasons in the NFL for himself, and has actually performed pretty well. 7 sacks for himself last season, plus a forced fumble. 8.5 sacks his rookie season. So while technically speaking, the number went down, still pretty good sack production out of his first two seasons with 15.5 total, upped his total tackles last season from the year before. Again, like I mentioned, he had a fumble recovery, a forced fumble and a fumble recovery for himself. Funny enough, 2 passes deflected as well. So linebacker? No, pass rusher. But Justin, talk about, really could be both. But irregardless, Justin, Jalen Phillips, what you've seen from him defensively in 4 games against the Jets, and now what do you think could be setting up Jalen Phillips to be a key cog in a Miami team that kind of needs the defense to take that next step this season.
Absolutely. I mean, Miami was middle of the pack in their sacks last year. They had 40, not great, not terrible. There were definitely teams that were worse. Now, that being said, their defense was rough overall, I think. I mean, I think they had like a lot of decent stats. They were very good in rush defense. They were decent in passing defense, but they gave up a lot of points, and they gave up points early on, and they left their offense in places, especially early in the season, where they had to come back. If I'm not mistaken, there was like a stat that like 3 of their games, they came back from down double digits in the fourth quarter in the first 6 games. So it's not something that you want to see there. There's obviously, dating back to the Brian Flores days, there's an issue in Miami with starting slow. They need to come out and they need to be strong this year. They've made a lot of trades. In theory, the coverage that you'll get now from
Jalen Ramsey?
Yes, will and the rest of that secondary with Xavier Howard and Sean Elliott and Javon Holland will help give him some time to get after the quarterback. But there's a wealth of guys there in Miami that he's going to have to compete with for pass rushing snaps. So we'll see. I think that he's got the ability to. He's certainly done well in situational downs, and he's gotten to the quarterback in the last couple seasons. Can he push those double-digit sacks? Hope not against the Jets, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, this could end up being, and we talked about, I think, I don't know if it was last week or the week before. We talked about it here recently about Miami needing Bradley Chubb to take that next level for them defensively, and if he will have a 10, 11, 12 sack season for himself. Maybe we're talking about the fact that even if he doesn't, can Bradley Chubb be such a focal point on the defense that he can free it up for another person? Jalen Phillips could be that guy. Like, I don't think you get 15 and a half sacks in your first 2 seasons just because, you're just so happenstance and getting to the quarterback. I think there's talent there. So, Rick, what do you think about Jalen Phillips and his chances of taking that next step for the Dolphins this season?
Let me tell you something. If I was an AFC East fan, I'd be scared of this fearsome foursome that's the Miami linebacking core of Chubb, Channing Tindall, Duke Riley, and Jalen Phillips. This is a scary group of linebackers to go up against. And I think you're right. You don't just have 15 and a half sacks over 2 seasons without some talent being there. The one thing that I think will also help them out this year, Vic Fangio is now their DC. Vic Fangio made Bradley Chubb into a star. Not only that, I think when he was on the DC for the Bears back in 2018 in Matt Nagy's first year, Matt Nagy be damned, the Bears led the league in turnovers forced and interceptions.
Yeah.
So Vic Fangio knows how to cook up a real good defense.
And he's worked with extremely talented defense players. You mentioned that Bears team. That team had Khalil Mack. Mm-hmm. And when he was in Denver as the head coach, he had Von Miller and Bradley Chubb.
So this is a guy. This is I think the AFC equivalent of Wink Martindale being on the Giants and the defensive guru mindset to just bring guys into the fold to make them into stars. And I think Jalen Phillips is a very talented linebacker. He will get after the pass. He will get after the run. I don't know about dropping back into coverage so much because I'm not really sure if that's really their thing. But that's the way you beat Miami is you have to go over the top because this secondary, they had Jalen Ramsey. And yes, they have Noah Igbenogany, whatever his name is. But
pretty close.
But their secondary last year got torched because they were hurt. Xavier Howard was hurt. Byron Jones was hurt.
Gone.
Yeah, he's gone now. So if you're a team facing Miami and you can find a way to throw the ball 45 times, you'll take not having a good run game because your passing game might be able to lead you to a victory. So
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Jalen Phillips is set up for a really good season. I think he's going to have 10, 11 sacks. I think he's going to hit double digits for the first time in his career. I hope none come against Justin, just so Justin can be happy on this podcast.
Indeed.
But, I mean, you minus 2 games, he could still get 10 sacks in 15 other games. So I personally think Jalen Phillips is going to have a great year. I think he's improved himself. I know sack number-wise, it may not have gone up last season, but I think just as a player, I think he became a little bit more well-rounded. And I'm with you, Rick. I don't think he's necessarily going to be the guy, like, of those 4 guys you mentioned. I don't think he's going to be the one that drops back. I think it's going to be him and Chubb focusing on as the main pass rushers of that unit. And I think the rest are going to be the other 2 are going to be able to drop back. But man, that Dolphins team, like Vic Fangio being there for a reason people are high on the Dolphins going into the season. And it's not just because of the offense this time around. Last year was the offense. This time I think it's going to be the defense that goes at it. Speaking of which, we have talked about defense for quite a while here. Will we get back to the offensive side of the ball?
No. The wheel's going to make us talk defense again.
Dalvin Tomlinson?
Well, who else is left?
Greg Russo.
Oh, there we go. We're on offense now.
There we go. And a guy that Rick brought up before the show starts. So Rick, I'm going to throw it to you because you're the one. As we were fixing our wheel there, we brought up Samaje Perine, a guy who's had a couple stops in his career of being a backup. He was on Washington for, I'm pretty sure, a season or two. He was on the Cincinnati Bengals last season where we know he made his impact. I believe it was the Chiefs or the Bills game where he had like a pretty good run to help set them up on a touchdown drive. And just the regular season, he was a very good backup running back for Joe Mixon. And now he's going to get a chance on the Denver Broncos. I wish it was on a better team for him, but on the Denver Broncos, where that team needs more balance in terms of offense and in terms of receiving and running. You have Sean Payton there, who's worked really good with running backs in the past, and Javonte Williams is talented, but he's going to start out the season still recovering from a very significant injury, as you detailed, Rick. So you're the one that pushed for this. Why is Samaje Perine potentially going to have a breakout year for himself this year?
So, believe it or not, Samaje Perine has played in 48 games in the last 3 seasons. This is a guy who's been able to stay on the field, but he was a backup to Joe Mixon. And I think when you talk about Denver and you mentioned Javonte Williams, he had an excellent rookie year, but last year he had the ACL tear, the LCL tear, and the PCL tear, which, basically means he's one free space and an MCL tear away from abbreviation injury bingo, in a sense. Look, he's going to be the guy. He's got to be the guy to kind of sort of, and it's funny because if you think about running backs in Denver that were backups or that were kind of like under the radar guys that all of a sudden had really good years because they were in Denver, look at Noshawn Marino, look at Mike Anderson, Clinton Portis, another guy. So there's a track record there. I know it's different systems. There's a track record there of Denver running backs coming up from seemingly under the ground to really become excellent players. And I think Perine's running style lends very well to Sean Payton's offense. And I think, you know what? I'm going to go there. On a 4th and 1, give him the damn ball. Don't let Russell Wilson throw it. You saw what happened in the Super Bowl. Don't do that again. So, yeah, I think this is a golden opportunity for Perine to reinvent himself. This is his 5th stop in the NFL because he was on Washington, Cincinnati, and Miami, and then he went back to Cincinnati again before going to Denver now. So this is his 5th stop with, I think, his 4th team. So you're starting to run out of time if you're Samaje Perine, but this is where you can really make amends and really make yourself into a star. So I think this is going to be a good year for him. I don't know about 1,000 yards, but if it's 1,000, that'll be great for them.
Right. I mean, there probably will be, when Javonte Williams is fully back in the fold and healthy, there probably is going to be a little bit more balance in that running back room because Sean Payton, I mean, we've seen him work with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. I think he likes to balance a talented running back room, to say the very least. But he's also worked with, not one-dimensional, but mainly one running back supposed to lead the show. So you never know. But Justin, Sean Payton, getting Samaje Perine in there, and really the running back room probably better on paper than what it was last season because, yes, they did have Javonte Williams, but he got hurt 6-7 games in. I think this season, if the Broncos are going to be a little more successful, I think the running game is going to have to really support Russell Wilson, and Samaje Perine could be that guy.
Well, absolutely. I think that Samaje Perine could be that guy, and if he's not that guy, I do expect him to them to have multiple people carrying the ball there. I mean, just look at the history of the Saints. I mean, when you had Reggie Bush, you had Chris Ivory and Darren Sproles, and then they had Mark Ingram, and they brought in guys, and they just always had a top rushing attack because they had multiple players. I mean, even when Mark Ingram was the guy there, they brought in Alvin Kamara. You know what I mean? They've always had people that can catch the ball out of the backfield, can move, and I think that Samaje Perine is one of those guys that fits excellently into what he wants to do. Now, whether or not he's going to be the lead back to start the season off is yet to be seen. We do have to see how Javonte Williams comes back from that horrific injury he had last year. Hopefully he's all good to start the season because, the NFL is just always better when the young talent stays healthy. But even with a 100% healthy with Javonte Williams, I expect Samaje Perine to have at least 30 to 35% of the carries.
Yeah, I'm with you. And especially, you mentioned now that Javonte Williams has had an injury, you got to be a little bit mindful of the fact that, you still give him a good bit of the workload because he is that talented. But now you're going to have, I think, a good balance there. I think Samaje Perine has shown in spurts how good he is. And I think him getting an increased role with this Broncos team is kind of the way they have to go. Again, Russell Wilson just didn't look the same last season. Me putting my, how do I say this, dislike of him aside, I think there have been things the last 2 seasons that have shown that he is not the same quarterback that he was at the peak of his powers. And now you need to play to that. And I think Sean Payton is an intelligent guy, to say the very least. I think he knows football, obviously. And I think he's going to be able to fix that Denver Broncos offense just in terms of balancing it out, because good God, it wasn't good last season, to say the very least. What they didn't score in the red zone until week 5, 6. That's bad. That's not good. So, to say the very least, I think I'm with you guys. I think Samaje Perine going to have a really good season. I think 700 yards on the ground and a couple hundred in the air. I think that would be a fair one. I think between him and Javonte Williams, that Denver Broncos rushing attack should be really good. All right, next spin.
It's Mr. Unlimited. Unlimited.
No.
I know.
That'll be, by the way, we'll eventually make it official, but we will have punishments this season for anyone that goes 0-4 in a week. And to say the very least, as the wheel gives us Greg Russo to talk about, so we just have more AFC East defensive players to torture Justin with. A Russell Wilson Subway sandwich will certainly be in the card for a punishment, particularly for me, because I live walking distance away from a Subway. So,
do they still serve those?
No, but I could just search up what was in it, and I could basically order it.
Oh yeah, you can absolutely create your own.
Yeah,
I have fun with that.
Now, why the hell would anyone want to? Who knows? But regardless. Anyway, speaking of which, Greg Russo, draft pick in 2021, really raw prospect coming out because I believe he sat out the entirety of what would have been his final season. But I mean, when he played in Miami, he was a beast. Now 2 seasons with the Buffalo Bills. Decent year last year, had to get a footing of things. Only 4 sacks his rookie season in 2021 with an interception. Last season showed up way more on the Buffalo Bills defensive line. 8 sacks for Greg Russo with the Buffalo Bills. And considering things, I think he could be in line for more here, boys. I love Greg Russo coming out the draft. I felt he was uber talented. I didn't view him as a raw prospect in terms of there's so much to work on there that he needs to sit out at first. I viewed him as raw as there's the physical gift, the tool. He had a couple moves, and he had to go to the right team to bring out the best in him. That's how I viewed him as in terms of calling him a raw prospect. I felt the Buffalo Bills were a really good team for him to go to, insulate him in year 1, and then we kind of saw a little bit more of him in year 2. Year 3 could be big. Justin, I'm sorry I'm doing this to you, so I'm going to go to you first real quick, just get out the way. Greg Russo, 8 sacks last year. I think if Jalen Phillips were talking about him for maybe 10 sacks this season, I think Greg Russo feels like close to a lock of having a really good year for himself in 2023.
The non-glamour stats are what get you, because Buffalo was very good against the run last year, which was something that they had struggled with the year before. I do like what they do in terms of building their defensive line and their guys up front. And you're right. I hope that he only has, at the very most, the exact same season he had last year, which was still not bad. 27 solo tackles, 8 sacks, and 1 forced fumble.
Rick?
So Buffalo's made things very, very interesting because they've added some really good pieces into their defense in the last month or so. They signed Shane Ray, who was a DN/linebacker who went to Missouri, then played in Toronto. So that was a very close over-the-border thing for him. And then about a couple weeks ago, they brought in Leonard Floyd into their defensive edge. So that also includes the fact they have, Carlos Basham is still there, and Shaq Lawson, and AJ Epinesa. So they've got a lot of DNs, man. This is a very overcrowded room. But Greg Russo, I even liked him when he was coming out of college too. He was like a top 10 pick as a sophomore in college because of how naturally talented he was. And he proved that last year he doubled his sack total. I think that he can get double digits this year. My question is more so going to be making sure he is the true number one D edge because of how many guys are over there that are super talented.
Right.
Guys can be moved, of course, absolutely, but at the same time, if Russo doesn't establish himself as the number one in training camp, a clear-cut number one, it could be rough, very rough for Buffalo going into that season without a clear number one D end.
Yeah.
But I expect Russo to do that. But if he doesn't, it's going to be a lot more than just Stephon Diggs being angry in Buffalo. Let me tell you that.
Yeah, and especially they have a guy who's trying to work his way back from tough injury last year, Von Miller, of course, missing basically the back half of last season. 8 sacks for Von Miller and limited playing time, ultimately missing the last bit of the year due to injury. And that's just another guy, when he's able to come back in, Rick, that's just another veteran in that defensive locker room, to say the very least. But I'm with you. I think Greg Russo has proven, of the young defensive players that you mentioned there, I think he deserves to be the number one of the young guys on the defensive side. Because I know I was actually circling between him or maybe AJ Epinesa on this list, but I think Greg Russo has shown more in his NFL career than AJ Epinesa has. And
yes.
Greg Russo is just like, I'm talking about uber natural talent. I was talking about it before with Bijan Robinson. I'm talking uber natural talent. This dude was a top 10 to 15 player in his respective draft. Just the pure monstrous talent and technique and skill this kid had. He was ACC Defensive Player of the Year in his first actual full season playing college football. How the hell does that happen? The only guy better than him, I think, in his defensive draft class was Chase Young, if I'm not mistaken, or within that year span. Like, again, I might be confusing years, maybe not the same year, but the only guys better than him in a certain collective period of time were just the Ohio State defensive tackles or defensive ends. Like, Greg Russo's good.
Well, so 2021 was when he was taken. He was 30th picked. Jalen Phillips went 18 to Miami.
That's his teammate.
Yep.
Oh, but hold on. Remember. This is why I actually brought up Chase Young, because when Greg Russo was playing, it was the year before. Because remember, I think he sat out.
Yes, he sat out the COVID year. Yeah, he did.
And he still went first round.
I was also going to say, drafted in that same year as Greg Russo was Micah Parsons. So
there's some really talented defensive players.
Very talented. Very talented.
Very least.
Yes.
Man, 2021 just producing monsters. So very least. All right, we move.
I love how there's now like 3 greens remaining.
Yeah, but 2 are darker, so I hope one of the dark greens goes with it.
They only have like one defensive guy left. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it. We've really gone through it. And we're not going to be talking about that defensive guy yet. The jingle is what gets me every single time. All right, Pat Freiermuth, drafted in 2021, so this is now year 3 as it is for a lot of these guys. I believe it was his rookie season where he had more touchdowns than he did in year 2. I think he had 6 or 7 touchdowns his rookie year, had north of 800 receiving yards in his sophomore year. For a Pittsburgh Steelers team that has undergone obvious massive change from his rookie season with Big Ben Roethlisberger to last season, starting with Mitch Trubisky and then going to Kenny Pickett, and of course having to deal with Matt Canada all of last year. Kind of tough. But at the same time, Pat Freiermuth, I think he was a guy that I kind of I didn't have strong feeling towards coming out of his draft. I didn't think he was going to be excellent, but I didn't have any negative connotations to his game. I knew he existed is how I would describe it. But I think Pat Freiermuth has really proven himself to be a very valuable piece. We always talk about tight ends being a young quarterback's best friend. I think he proved early on that he's a reliable option for Kenny Pickett. And I think the expectation is that maybe he could be just a little bit more than just a reliable option this season. So, Rick, Pat Freiermuth, again, this is one of the guys that we were talking about. You were someone who was a big proponent of adding him to this wheel. Tell the people about Pat Freiermuth, because I don't think a lot of people outside of Pittsburgh really know too much about his game. Why is Pat Freiermuth in line for a pretty good year 3 here?
You know that in 2 seasons, he's played 32 games, and he's already 7th all-time in Steelers history in tight end receiving yards?
That's wild.
Yeah. This is a guy who almost 1,300 yards receiving. He has 9 touchdown receptions. A guy who has 123 catches during his 2-year career so far. And Pittsburgh added Darnell Washington in the tight end room. He's a 6'7" monster. So you know that if they run 2 tight end sets, Freiermuth's going to be open. And this is a guy who I think they're trying to build into the Heath Miller mold. I mean, look, Pittsburgh has a lot of talent in their offense. Najee Harris, of course. Their wide receiver room with George Pickens. They have Allen Robinson there now. Don't sleep on Pat Freiermuth, man. Really, he's an excellent option and a consistent, reliable player. Now, he did have 2 concussions in his rookie season, but last year he seemed to get through that okay. So I think he'll be another good candidate. And again, as long as Kenny Pickett can just find him in space, this is a guy who could, do something really, really special this year. I'm not saying 1,000, but he had 732 last year, so it's safe to say that he's got probably in the line for more. The one thing he's got to do is exactly what happened with Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet had no touchdowns going into last season. He went from 7 to 2 last year. So more times finding the end zone for Pat would be great for the Steelers offense.
Absolutely, and maybe we could argue that's the Matt Canada effect. Actually,
there you
go. Justin, what do you think? Pat Freiermuth. I mean, this is a Steelers team that, if we really look at it, skill position wise, I mean, you have Deontay Johnson and George Pickens on the wide receiver end of things, with Calvin Austin III now coming off of a rookie season. He missed the entirety of due to injury. Maybe he could add, at least in the return game, I think Calvin Austin will be absolutely electric for the team. You have Najee Harris, who's hoping for a big bounce back year for himself. Pat Freiermuth not figuring himself out. He's already established himself in offense. But what do you think about Pat Freiermuth and being Kenny Pickett's best friend this season, basically?
Well, like you said, a good tight end is the quarterback's safety net, really, and that's what I expect him to be there for Kenny Pickett. I expect him to have a good year. I don't expect 2 touchdowns to be the norm for him per season. I'm not saying that he's going to light the world on fire, but would I be surprised if he had 600, 700, 800 yards even and 6 touchdowns? Absolutely not.
Yeah. He's talented. He plays in the system. He's a good player. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler through and through, and that's why they drafted him. So it totally makes sense. God damn it, Mike Tomlin. You always got the guys that fit your team. All right.
Please come to our show, Mike Tomlin. Now we have our YouTube channel. Please come to our show.
The goal is still Mike Tomlin somehow becomes the first guest in show history. I don't know if that'll happen, but
listen. Now that we have our own YouTube channel, and it's not going to be he's the guy that came on to the same channel that Chris Carlin came on to. I think it works.
Yeah, someone actually did the research, eh?
Aha! Of course I do. It's called I have less time than you know what to do with.
Yeah, fair enough. I believe the last defensive addition that we made onto the board was Dalvin Tomlinson in terms of our slated guys. The oldest of the players that we have as well, I believe 28 or 29 years old. He's played a couple seasons, played for the Giants, he's played for the Minnesota Vikings, now finds himself obviously with the Cleveland Browns. And a very unique situation, to the very least, in terms of a full season next to a very good defensive player of the year candidate, obviously, with Myles Garrett. Justin, I want to throw it to you first. Dalvin Tomlinson, good player throughout his whole career, very consistent player, guy who's earned his keep in the NFL. But now that he's next to an elite pass rusher, I think the first one of his career, really, maybe could we see a little bit more from him in that aspect of things?
Well, let me tell you, they're going to really have to focus on the edges there. So there's a good chance that you see this kid break out in 2023. I mean, to have a chance to play in a defensive line with Myles Garrett on one side and Zadarius Smith on the other, assuming they could both stay healthy, this kid could be in for a monster season as an interior defensive tackle. I mean, look, if he has, if he stays there and has like a mediocre stat season, but it's just the huge run stuffer that they think he could be there, or that he's proven that he could be, that's a full success. But I don't even think that's the case. He had 2.5 sacks last year and a forced fumble. He had 19 solo tackles. If you want to tell me that he was going to push into 8-9 sacks as an interior defensive tackle, I wouldn't be surprised. And that's because I expect them to rack up sacks there in Cleveland.
Rick, you were big for pushing Tomlinson here. Why do you think that 2023 could be, he's set himself, we know of him. I think he's guaranteed himself a long career in the NFL, obviously, with how long he's played so far, and I think another 3, 4, 5 years in his career. But why is this year going to be a massive year for Dalvin Tomlinson?
It's very simple. Because he got paid a lot of money, so he better do his job properly. He got a 4-year, $57 million deal to go to Cleveland from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And Justin's absolutely right. If you look at that front for the Browns this year, even guys that they drafted too, because they brought in a few guys in the draft too. They brought in Siaki Ika from Baylor and Isaiah McGuire from Missouri, 2 young studs who are going to be behind Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith. You need a plug guy in the middle. That's what made Richard Seymour so good in New England, was that he was just a guy that clogged up the middle, and then when he got his chances, he made quarterbacks pay what he had the chance to get rush the quarterback. And for Cleveland, this is what they need, because they have a golden opportunity, I think, this year to really make a statement. I don't know if they're going to be a team that's going to win the AFC North, but they're a team that you do not want to play because of how frightening this defense is. I mean, you talk about we talked about JOK last season and into this year as well. And the fact that they have a very decent secondary with Juan Thornhill, Denzel Ward, and Grant Delpit, all guys that can really make you pay on the back end too. But it's that front interior line that, especially in this division with the running backs that they have, if you can stop the running backs and make all three other teams in your division try and throw the ball more than they want to, you'll be in for some really high-scoring contests and some really good results for Cleveland.
Absolutely. It's very interesting. I want to see how he does, because while he is next to the defensive pass rusher of that team, it doesn't necessarily mean that he'll get the stats. Not to say he can't, not to say he won't, but just, I think when you mentioned his contract, I think he was brought there to really shore up the run defense that, was basically nothing last year, in part because Jadeveon Clowney and his tenure in Cleveland just didn't end that great. I think that's the reason why he's here. But, pass rush would be a plus, to say the very least.
Yeah.
And that was the last defensive player on the board, so now it's just all offense. What do I got here? It's 2 wide receivers and a running back. And
how about this for a pivot?
There we are. So J.K. Dobbins of the Baltimore Ravens, a team that has, totally not been in the news cycle this offseason because they didn't have any drama whatsoever in terms of not paying players or anything. Have we talked about the Ravens? Yeah, okay, no seriousness. J.K. Dobbins is a guy coming out of Ohio State, was viewed as talented, but has definitely dealt with injury concerns throughout his career, including missing, I believe it was all of 2021 due to injury, being a little bit banged up last year, and forcing the Ravens to basically become a Lamar Jackson run-heavy team. But I think it's obvious, guys, the number one thing for him is going to be health. His health is going to be the key balance this season of the Ravens rushing attack and how much better it can be. Now that it's not just going to be Lamar Jackson taking goddamn halfback draws up the middle as the quarterback. Rick, I'll throw it to you first. Really a balanced running back room. They hope it's a combo of Dobbins and Gus Edwards. But when Dobbins was first drafted, I think the expectation was he was going to become the eventual number 1 running back in Baltimore. So what can Baltimore look at the fact that this is a guy entering year 4? I think the last year of his deal, because he was a second-round pick, if I'm not mistaken. This is a guy that needs to have a big 2023 for himself. What's going to be the thing for J.K. Dobbins to have that year?
Health of him and health of Lamar Jackson. Because it wasn't even the case when he wasn't healthy. It's also, you saw it last year too, when Lamar wasn't healthy, the Ravens offense became very one-dimensional and very focused on just trying to pass the ball for the better part of it. I think as Anthony Brown and Tyler Huntley were not good backup options there. J.K. Dobbins is frustrated, and he's got to run angry this year because, he has to cement himself as that number 1 back in Baltimore. I think there's been a lot of back by committee sort of things that are going on here. And Baltimore did draft a little firecracker in Keaton Mitchell out of East Carolina, a 5'8" guy. So you want to try and pair him with J.K. Dobbins and make a little thunder and lightning tandem? That's fine, but this is make or break for Dobbins, man. And it was horrible that he got lost in the 21 offseason, the last preseason game with the ACL tear. He came back last year and was fine, but again, that Ravens offense was so Lamar-centric that it didn't matter if he had 1,000 yards because it wasn't really going to factor into anything. So I think you have to have a more balanced attack. They have to have a more opportunity for giving Dobbins more runs. And I think a breakout for him will be 20 carries a game, because that'll be nice to kind of give him a little extra work and kind of prove himself. Because this is all about proving who J.K. Dobbins really is as an NFL running back, I think.
Right. Justin, we kind of talked about it with some of the early guys, maybe more Rondell more than anything, but proving that you could be on an NFL roster past the season might be what we could call a breakout here. What do you think about Dobbins' future?
It depends on his knees. Rick is absolutely right. He missed 8 games last year. I'm sorry, he missed 9 games last year?
Yeah.
He didn't play anything the year before. Rick's right. If he can do 15 carries a game and stay healthy for 15 games and have 1,000 yards, sure, I'll take that. I think any Ravens fan would take that in a heartbeat at this point. But if he can stay healthy, that's one thing. But I don't really see it anymore for him.
Damn, poor J.K. Dobbins. I'm cheering for you, kid. I'm cheering for you to say the very least.
I am too, man.
All right, 2 wide receivers here. Basically, who are we going to talk about first? Ironically, one AFC, one NFC here. Click.
good. It's the guy that I'd rather talk about, the other one.
Oh, okay. So the final spin of the wheel gives us basically the order which we're going to finish off the show here in terms of talking about breakout candidates. We'll start with Terrace Marshall Jr., a guy coming out a couple seasons ago. He was a understudy, you could kind of say, in the national championship winning LSU team. But the guys that played in front of him, only guys called Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. Nobody that special. Huh? But no, in all seriousness, Terrace Marshall Jr., a guy who, when he did finally get his time at LSU after Jets was drafted, and after Jamar Chase sat out his last season, really proved himself to be a pretty talented wide receiver, lined up in multiple different spots around the field, showed himself off in college. Hasn't gotten a lot of playing time so far in Carolina, but as I'm going to throw it to Justin first, that's probably because of Matt Rule, who Justin was, on the firing campaign for. So now that Matt Rule is gone, the shackles are gone, Justin. Why can Terrace Marshall Jr. finally have let's say a first good season in the NFL in 2023?
Well, let me just say this. I don't necessarily know if Matt Rule was the shackle there. DJ Moore being there was tough because he commanded all of the targets, and it's not like he had consistency at quarterback in his first couple of years in the season. So I think that a new system may benefit him. I think they expect a lot from him, and let's see what this kid Bryce Young could do, because like we said before, if he's the offensive rookie of the year and he could start turning things on, that might be the best thing for Terrace Marshall.
Rick, do you have high hopes for them? Because you clearly want to talk about him more than Kadarius Toney.
I mean, listen, I think you've seen steady improvement from him from year 1 to year 2. He improved his receptions numbers, he improved his yards. And yeah, Bryce Young is probably the most talented quarterback he's got to work with. I think the thing that helps out too is that the wide receiver room over there is a lot of guys who were number 2s, like DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, Laviska Shenault. There's no clear-cut number 1 in my mind in Carolina right now, and that could be a golden opportunity for Terrace Marshall to be that guy, to be the number 1 receiver there, because, somebody has to be the first option over there. And this is a guy who said, played behind all the guys at LSU, saw how they played, really understood everything. Now he's got a golden opportunity to make something work, and if Bryce Young can feed on the ball a bunch, Carolina's going to be dangerous. So I think he has to. I think it's a really good opportunity for him to improve and advance forward.
I'm with you. And I think with, the wide receiver room, sans Adam Thielen being pretty wide open on who could be the number 2 and 3 and the most consistent options, I think it's there. I think he showed us talent at LSU. I was very high on him coming out the draft. I think he is extremely talented. I think this is the year for Terrace Marshall to show himself as talented as he is. All right, last player. We'll just go straight to Rick to continue it off. Kadarius Toney. Had troubles staying healthy in New York for a bit. Didn't really play a lot and eventually wanted to get out, and kind of shockingly got out, actually. I don't think a lot of people would have expected a young wide receiver like that to just find his way out of New York, but he did. Now Kansas City Chiefs played a bit of a role in the postseason for them, especially in the Super Bowl. Caught one of the touchdowns from my homeboy and was flexing on social media about that Super Bowl ring. So full season now, no definitive number 1, just wide receiver speaking, because obviously we know Travis Kelce is the top option. There's room in that offense for anyone to break out. Why should it be Kadarius Toney, the former first-round pick? Rick?
It shouldn't be. If I have to be polite about this, and I guess I will, I think this is a system that's better beneficial for him. But the thing is that it's a new offense again, because remember, Eric Bieniemy's gone. So did he take that offense with him? Or is it Andy Reid's offense that's now being shepherded by, let me see who their coordinator is. Oh, good, it's Matt Nagy. Oh, great. Well, nice knowing you, Kansas City. Clearly, Kadarius Toney showed that he does have potential. The question really is, if he isn't utilized in the way that he thinks he's going to be utilized, will he have another fit like he did in New York? And I think that's the big key there, is that in Kansas City, there's a little more wide openness for him to run. And that's why not only did he catch a touchdown in the Super Bowl, he set the record for the longest punt return in the Super Bowl. So he's got talent that's there. You just got to keep him happy. And that's not something you want to see in your number 3 wide receiver, because as Justin knows, Elijah Moore was not very happy. And look where he is now. He's in Cleveland. So.
Yeah. So future, not Kansas City Chief member, according to Rick. Justin, what do you think about Kadarius Toney here? Again, it's super wide open. The Kansas City Chiefs, if we're just strictly speaking wide receivers, and when I talk about a receiving room, it's pretty wide open because you have Kadarius Toney there. You have another young guy entering year 2 in Sky Moore. You have a guy who I've been high on since college, and I hope he's able to make the roster and get legitimate playing time. And Justin Ross, who I think could have a really good. I think he'd be really good for Andy Reid and the Chiefs personally, but we'll see about that. But just strictly focusing on Kadarius Toney here, Justin, how can he become one of the top options for Kansas City in the offense this season?
Get open and catch the ball. That's all they really need from him. I mean, if he could fill that kind of Tyreek role where he's like that guy that's fast and can run his routes efficiently and catch the ball when he's open, then he's going to thrive there. And I think that they believe that he can be that guy. It's going to depend on his consistency and his ability to catch the ball and to vibe with Patrick Mahomes, which, for as great as he's been, there's been plenty of guys there that have not had success as receivers.
Not to mention, too, Jerry, they also have Justin Ross. They have John Ross, who was a top 10 pick a couple of years ago as a wide receiver, trying to reclaim himself, too. So,
I'm more focused on Justin personally.
I know. Well,
both Justin Ross and
Justin Ross. Well,
both of them very focused on this.
Yeah. Focus on that Justin
podcast.
Both of them are my boys. Both of them are my friends. But yes, ultimately, it'll be interesting to see. I think Kadarius Toney he was a guy that I going into this draft, I wasn't necessarily the highest on him. He became a first round pick. Didn't work out for New York. We'll see if it works out in Kansas City. It should. I think it's a more controlled locker room, and he has he should have plenty of chances to become a guy there. But at the same time, supremely talented quarterback, you kind of have to make do and understand, Mahomes and Andy Reid run the show. You are a passenger. And if he can't figure that out, I think it might be tough times. But I hope he does, and I hope the success is able to mitigate him, because they always say winning delays things like, bad attitude and stuff. So we'll see. All right. That completes the Sports Agents of Chaos 2023 breakout candidates for the NFL season upcoming. Will these guys break out? Who knows? We may go 0 for 12 in our guys that we think could potentially have a good year. Who the hell knows? But I like to think that we picked a good list of guys that I think should be able to have a pretty good year, to say the very least. All right. We're almost at the end of the show. There's one thing left. We've had the fun. We've had the football. Let's finish with all chaos. In the usual way, Ranton, Rick's Rostrum Podium. Rick, send us into the sunset. Sun's out, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. My honorable mention rant for this week goes to Jurg's parent company, the digital side of ESPN, and it's also really a comment on the state of American tennis as a whole, because their headline there's a tournament, I think, in England going on right now, and the number one player, or soon-to-be number one player, Carlos Alcaraz, is in the final. And he beat an American player by the name of Sebastian Korda to get there. Well, ESPN's headline was, Alcaraz outlasts American to move on to the final. Didn't even say the name of the guy, just like an American. Doesn't matter. American tennis, doesn't matter. You're there, you're from America, great, you lost, get out, goodbye. Come on, ESPN. Try and at least uplift this sport, because, I get it, it's not Serena or Venus or Coco, but Sebastian Korda is somebody. His father won an Australian Open back in the 90s. Give the guy some love. Number 3, I want to talk a little bit about. So I have 2 NBA stories here. Number 3 for me goes back to a certain trade that was made involving a soon-to-be Hall of Famer, CP3, Chris Paul. Now the trade itself is what it is, but this is a rant on Matt Ishbia and the Phoenix Suns in general. Part A of this is, why did Chris Paul have to find out about this trade through his son? Why couldn't you have just been man enough to call him and tell him in that way? That's kind of not cool. And number 2, why in God's name would you ever associate yourself with Isaiah Thomas, Anuka Brown Saunders' favorite person of all time? Come on now. Really? Do better, Phoenix. I know it's a brand new owner and we got rid of Robert Sarver, and that's great, but this is not a good look for having Isaiah Thomas here. We can do better than this. Number 2. The 2023 NBA draft has come and gone. The 2024 NBA draft is soon to come. And I have an announcement to make based upon this rant. I am officially entering myself in the 2024 NBA draft.
I know where you're going with this.
So, I don't know if you heard about this. Jordan Haber is a law student who found a loophole in the NBA draft entry proceedings, which I think said, you have to graduate college with a certain, thing or whatever it was, and have all your eligibility exhausted. So he declared himself for the NBA draft. One problem. Jordan Haber has never played a minute of college basketball. So if he can do it, then I just declared it. Go to the Wikipedia page 2024, put me in there, please. I'm a 6'2", 260-pound power forward who can make 3.7 points per game and shoots better than Shaq in free throws. So somebody draft me. Let's go. Come on.
I hope you realize someone that watches this is going to edit you into the Wikipedia page for 2024.
Fantastic. I would love for that to happen. That would be amazing. Yep. That happened. So this is happening too. So if I'm not on the podcast in 2 years, y'all know why. I'll be riding the bench for the Cleveland Cavaliers, which is fine. And finally, my number one here. Again, there were some that I was thinking about doing, but I can save them for next week because they're more timeless. This is a timely one. Graduation ceremonies. Since we just had ours this week and, a lot of different things were going on there. Maybe it's just me, and maybe I'm an old man, and maybe I'm an old man of a certain pigmentation. But I believe the rules are when you go up on stage and hand your card and have your name read, that you shake the hands of the person, get your diploma, and move on from there. Well, I have seen 8-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and 20-year-olds grittying on the graduation stage. I even saw a dab once. And I'm sure somebody tried to do the WAP or the floss. There's a time and place for that. And it's not graduation, at least not the formal festivities. If you want to recreate that at your own graduation party that no one will attend, just floss in the mirror for yourself, that's fine. Put your cap and gown on and do the floss, or gritty your way down the stairs and trip and fall and break your ankle. No problems there. Why do we feel the need that we have to constantly dance out everything? It doesn't make any sense. Again, maybe I'm just an old man, and maybe you should get off my lawn, but stop grittying in my graduation. Very important you do that. That goes for you, Kyrgyzstan. Stop grittying in my graduation. Very simple.
When does graduation happen for Kyrgyzstan?
Never.
Oh my God. How dare you not be updated on their education system, Rick? How dare you?
It's not that they actually never graduate. They go straight from high school to the small world, right?
God. All right. Anyways, so Rick, this bothers you, but I've been seeing for years people do it. Justin, come on, you're with me here. People doing backflips at their graduation ceremonies.
Backflips are fine. Backflips are fine because that's
fine and not.
That is a feat of athletic achievement. Not everyone can do a backflip.
Walking down the stage at graduation is a feat of achievement that not everyone can do.
It is. Okay, walking, yes. But don't sully it with any more of this, dancing on the ceiling nonsense. You're not Lionel Richie, okay? Backflips are fine because, again, not everyone can do a backflip. Everyone can try and do a gritty, and no one can do a gritty as well.
Everyone can try to do a backflip.
No, you shouldn't.
I don't think that would end up well for us.
Let me tell you something. If you're Broderick Jones or someone of that ilk and body, and you try and do a backflip, and you fall through the stage, like the last ride from Undertaker to Muhammad Hassan, it's not going to go very well for you.
Jesus Christ! So backflips are good. No dancing. What else?
Just normal decorum. Normal decorum. I don't need you to bro hug the president of the university when he clearly is not a guy who needs a bro hug.
Oh, so you're not good with a dap up? I like a nice dap up if it makes sense.
Well, especially if it's a female president. Don't bro hug a female president.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's not how you want to start your college career with a Me Too lawsuit.
Well, post-college career. All right, fair point. So according to Rick, backflips yes, dancing no, bro hugs only once per ceremony, and probably only a limit of 1 to 2 backflips per ceremony. So
and also just the one last thing, but this is also a very important one. If you bedazzle your cap, don't throw it.
Yeah, no, you know what? I agree with you. If you're gonna go through all the effort of making your graduation cap very special, why would you throw it in the air?
Well, two reasons why not. Number one, yeah, you go through that entire effort. Number two, if you throw it in the air and one of the pieces flies off and gouges somebody out in the eye,
okay,
or it goes into someone's mouth and they start choking at graduation, I saw some creative ones. Some pictures were great, but people had there was a guy who had the Minecraft coins on his graduation cap. That's awesome. I really hope he didn't throw it because that cap ain't gonna work anymore.
Rick. I mean, I was with you on the bedazzle part, but then you saw just threw his head. Oh my God! Wait, you didn't turn it before you threw it. That means you didn't graduate. You're still on this podcast for your lifetime contract, Rick.
No, make a new lambda.
Too late. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining us on this week's edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Our breakthrough candidates, We've gone through them. We've talked about the guys we're expecting for good seasons. We had some fun on the show as we always did. And now, again, we're very close. We're probably another week or two away from beginning the Sports Agents of Chaos 2023 NFL Divisional Breakdowns. That's going to be a fun time. 8 straight weeks of division breakdowns, followed by the 9th week of playoff predictions and records. You're going to want to be in tune for that. And the way you do it is to continue to watch this amazing program that you've been doing so far. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's edition of the pod. Like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Sports Agents of Chaos. We can finally say that. And we'll see you guys next weekend. Take care, everybody.